Greetings and hallucinations. Welcome to Spun Together. My name is Buddy, and I'd like to welcome you to my home. Come on in. I have tea. I can make coffee. I have sugar cookies if anyone's interested. Join me at the table. We'll sit, chat for a while, and just talk. If you want to do some crafts, we'll do some crafts. I'd first like to say thank you to everyone for your kind words, your words of wisdom, for subscribing, for the thumbs up, and for being there with me and helping me through this journey. I would like to start with a few things that I've been working on the past few days. Number one, I did Fiber Spider had put out a tutorial for snowflakes. So I had the idea I wanted to do a snowflake, but I wanted something a little different. So I used his snowflake pattern and turned it into a coaster. It's his last snowflake. I think he has 12, either 12 or 21. I think it's 12. And all I did was start with the simple pinhole. You can either use the magic loop, chain 4, and then do your single crochet in the middle. The next row it's put 2 in each stitch. Then the next row it's put 2 in the first stitch and skip 1, or single in the next, and keep going until you have as big as you want. And if you put sides on it, it does end up round. But this one, it's the same hexagon shape that the snowflake was. And what I'm thinking about doing, because I just went through my stash yarn to see what I had, and so I used acrylic and a size H crochet hook. What I'm going to do for when I do the set is I'm either going to use my crochet thread and get a colored thread to do the background, or I'm going to use like a number 1 weight and then do different color backgrounds or variegated backgrounds, because I do have a lot of sock yarn that I could use for the back. I just need a light blue to a white for the snowflake. So that's something I experimented with just to get off of my monogamous knitting. The other thing that I've been playing with, I had a bolster that needed a cover on it. And for 18 years, my cat was my knight in calico armor. She protected the house from all the leaf monsters blowing around outside, from all the birds and the feral cats that were outside, as well as chase the snowflakes, keep them from coming in. So I had a table or a stool in front of every window that she could get to, except for the one here where the dining table is. And I'd make a quilt to put on top of each one. It was my cat quilt. That way it would protect the table itself, and then I would take a piece of foam and cover it, put it down so it should have a softer place to sit on. But I've made small quilts for each one. She's no longer with me, so I took one of her quilts and decided I was going to make a cover for my bolster. And it was a Bargello, so I just barely enough to cover from one side to the other and still have enough for both ends. So that was just a quick, mindless something just to give my brain, my hands a break from what I would have been working on. The main thing that I've been working on has been my mother's sweater. Before I show that, I've got a question. How many modifications can you make to a pattern and it will still be that designer's pattern versus your own pattern? And the reason I'm asking, this is very loosely the pattern that I went by. It's the one that I've been using for ages, and as you see, it calls for different sections. 2 for the front, 2 for the sleeve, 1 for the back, sewn together, and then a binding put around it afterwards. I decided I was going to try something different. I wanted to do it my way. This is how I keep notes, and this is why my mother fusses at me for not writing it down. This is the mods that I've made. I've got basic mods, my tick counts, my calculations, and I have one more page if I can turn it. And the stitch count that I come up with when I do it. I have made so many mods to this pattern that I think it does qualify as my very own. The original was knit in separate pieces, starting from the rib here at the sleeve, rib at the bottom, and worked up and seamed together. For mine, the sleeves, I did both sleeves separate, but I started at the top and worked my way down to the rib. I left about 2 inches straight without decreasing any, and then switched to a smaller needle size just for the cuff on the sleeves. The main mods that I've made, and yes, I did start it over after the last episode, and I'll explain a little more about that. So here's what I have so far. I am working on the rib, so I do have maybe another day's worth to go. But I did a provisional cast on at the shoulder seam, just straight across the shoulder seam. And in order to get the slant for the shoulder, I did Japanese short rows. For the front, I did 12, went back, 24, and went back. For the back, I did just the opposite, 12 and 24. And that way they will sort of overlap because it was a 32 stitch. I also did the neck binding and the front binding all as I was going along. So that meant I had 14 rows of rib for the center back, and then as I picked up for the front, and these are just to hold it so it won't stretch all wonky, I was able to just carry that along the front as I was going along, so it's self-binding. I did put all of my increases, instead of doing decreases, I used, because I'm going from the shoulder down, I did all of my increases before I got to this underarm section, and that way it all sort of blends in. Because for my mother, I wanted something that would come this way to keep her chest warmer, but not up enough that it would rub against where she has her pacemaker. And I did not want it low like what you'd see with a lot of, especially with the men's cardigans, where it would come down between the chest and the stomach area there at the sternum. I wanted it somewhere closer to where it would help her stay warm and around her chest. And she's like me, she cannot stand anything against her neck. So that was one of the other mods that I made. And when I joined the front and the back, there is no side seam. Everything is joined in together. I did sloping increases here for the sleeves, and then I just had a few stitches to pick up in the middle. And my ends are not woven in, so there's a little bit on the stretch side, but they're not bad. For the back of the neck, all I have to do is weave in just this part at the very back of the neck, because all of the rest of it I've captured all the way down the front. One of the reasons I started over is when you do provisional cast on, this word's going to screw me up, you'll have a set of stitches going this direction, and then when you pick up to continue, they sort of overlap. In stockinette, you can't really tell where those stitches are. As you can see here for the shoulder, you can't really tell where one starts and one begins. If you look close enough, you'll be able to, but not from a distance. When working with 1x1 rib, the problem I was having before is I had a major jog where I had started here, where I would join for the underarm. There was a noticeable jog right here, and I could not work it out. I tried going back several rows and picking up and working it back down. I used crochet hook to try to get everything smoothed out, but the way that the yarns had twisted, I never could get that smooth join. And what I ended up doing is just here in the very back of the neck. That's going to be the only join that you will see, where before that was in the front. See, when you stretch it out, you can see where one will come up and then you'll have that jog to the other. I could not get that worked out on a 1x1 rib. So I am glad that I started over. I started with, on this one, I have a 10 stitch rib. On the other one, I had, I think it was a 5 stitch rib. So it is a little bit wider, which makes it just a little bit, you can ease the curvature into it better because you've got that little bit more room for a curvature here without it pulling. I did not want it to pull, and I did not want it to stretch on the straight parts. I did not want that stretch to happen down through here. What I have been doing for the rib itself, I've been doing the stitches on the very tips of the needle. Instead of having the yarn going through like this, I would have it just on the very tips, and I would tighten my tension just a little bit. That would give me almost the effect of going down a needle size, and without having to actually go down a needle size and do each part separately. And everything is worked in together. It has enough stretch both ways without it just drooping over like some rib will do. I've already added the pockets, and for the pockets, I just went through, I'd already made the pockets first. I had everything on a waste yarn. I just put it on a smaller needle, and as I was knitting the row across, I did like you would work with 3 needle. It was a stitch from here, a stitch from the pocket, knit it together as one, stitch from the main, stitch from the pocket, and work it together as one. So that way the bottom is already knit in. I will either be doing a mattress stitch up the side, or what I thought about doing is a chain stitch and let the chain itself be on the outside, and that way it will coordinate in the same pattern as what you'd see in the rest of the knit, because it is a stockinette. I am this far with the rib, so almost through, a little more than halfway. This is all the yarn I have left. So I need to make sure that I keep enough set aside to sew in the sleeves and the back of the neck and to work the sides of the pockets in. So I think I'm going to have enough for maybe 5 more rows, give or take. But again, we'll find out. And for that, I'm keeping it once again in my grandmother's knitting basket that she gave me. I was a teenager when she gave it to me, early teens. And it's one that I'd refabricated with the pockets and the carrying loop and everything. I've used this ever since she gave it to me. I had to put new fabric on it. I was in my 20s when it The old fabric just gave way, whether it was age, whether it was use, abuse. It just had done all it could do. There's nothing left in the fabric, so I had to create a new cover for it. Okay, the fabric I'm using, or the yarn that I'm using, is some of the Snuggly Wuggly. It is actually a lot softer than, I want to say 90% of the acrylics I've ever worked with. It is 100% acrylic in the colorway of pale blue. Maybe it'll focus, maybe it won't. There is 141 grams per ball, made in Turkey, and that is 446 yards, or 408 meters. I used my Chalgu needles, size 7, except for the cup on the sleeve. I used size US 7, which is a 4.5 millimeter, and I did go down to a US size 5, which would be a 3.75 millimeter, I think. Let me double check to make sure. Size 5 is, yes, 3.75 millimeter. That's basically all I have today. I've been almost monogamous with the sweater. I'm trying to get it finished. Don't know if it's going to be mailed to her or if I'll be seeing some of the family later on. She has indicated that she'd like to come out to my house one last time. So we shall see how that goes. Right now, she's been fighting a lot of the sinus and congestion and all that seems like most people have been fighting. But with her, it tends to settle in her chest. So we have to keep a close watch on that. But we'll find out, as time goes on, because she is doing the inhaler. She has her nebulizer when she needs it, and she's steroids again. So hopefully she'll be over it soon. She's sounded a lot better today than she has been. Today is Friday, December the 9th. And we will just take it one day at a time and see how she does. Last year, I spent quite a few weeks staying with her as she recovered from a couple of different things. So this year, so far, so good, knock on wood. Let's see, I've covered the pillow, the snowflake, the sweater. The only other thing I can think of is, do you know that the number one cause for dry skin is towels? Just remember that next time you get out of the shower or the bath. Again, I would like to thank everyone for all your kind words, for subscribing, for commenting, for the thumbs up. I really do appreciate it. I have read some wonderful comments. I enjoy reading the comments. I am not the best at it. Just like my email, sometimes it's a couple days before I get to it for various reasons, but I do read it. I do try to respond to everyone. I think I'm up to date on everything, and I've been warned that it will not always show when someone comments, and then all of a sudden you'll get a rollover of comments. And I've already noticed that with a couple of different people. But as soon as I've seen those comments, I've tried to respond to them. At least, give it a heart and a thank you. And I enjoy hearing what you're doing, what you're working on. And everyone that has commented or suggested other things or other people to watch, I do appreciate that. I have been getting caught up on some of the Vlogmas. I usually watch about 3, sometimes 4 a day. They help me just get through the day sometimes, just have someone in the background or being able to watch and see what they're doing, what they're working on. A little bit of here's what the family's doing or behind the scenes type thing. There's a couple of them I'm like, didn't you do that yesterday? And then there's a couple it's like, I really enjoyed what you're doing this time. And then there's a couple of dyers that I like to watch, and one of them she'll give a sneak peek, but she's sneaky about her sneak peek. She'll do it in black and white, so it'll keep you guessing, but you see how she goes about applying the dye, how she does her sprinkles, how she gets the yarn to set, and even though it's in black and white, it's fun to watch because you get to see a technique that you may or may not have known about. And then there's a couple that's, yeah, this is not holding my attention today, so we'll check on it tomorrow. And then there's some that's just good for a good laugh, make you smile, makes you wish it was longer. Just sit down with a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and just have them across the table from you like an old friend. Those are the ones that I really enjoy the most. It's like having company over. And for me, company is someone that's willing to sit at the kitchen table, and an hour or 2 hours later, when your butt's numb, you're like, we have sat here and talked this whole time without even moving. That's the way it was with my grandparents, my grandmoms, at my mama's. That's just a comfort thing for a lot of people. It's one that I've always enjoyed, and I think a lot of other people have used that same process as just like a meal on the table. It's just comfort, and it's food for the thought, food for the soul, and something to think about. I'm not going to say argue about, because you do not argue at the table. It's something you may discuss, whether it's a difference of opinion or you're trying to get to explain something to someone and they all of a sudden understand what you're saying, or someone is explaining something to you and then you have that aha moment and you can see where they're coming from. But never argue at the table. That's just bad karma, because that's where you feed your body and you feed your soul. And I would like to say thank you to everyone, and please, blessings.